My name is Heather Mitchell, and at 31, I've built a successful career as a financial analyst in Boston, far from my Michigan roots. Growing up, I always sensed my parents favored my brother Andrew. What I never expected was discovering their actual plan, using me as their personal ATM to fund both Andrew's lifestyle and their retirement. The accidental text message that revealed their scheme shattered my world, but ultimately led me to reclaim my worth. Before I share how I uncovered my family's financial betrayal, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt used by the people who should love you most. I grew up in a modest two-story home in suburban Michigan, with neatly trimmed hedges and a backyard swing set my father assembled one summer weekend. Our family looked perfect from the outside. My father Robert worked as a mid-level manager at an automotive parts supplier. My mother Diana taught third grade at the local elementary school, and my brother Andrew was 2 years younger than me. We even had a golden retriever named Buddy, who completed our all-American family portrait. But beneath the surface, invisible fault lines ran through our home. From my earliest memories, I sensed the imbalance in how my parents treated Andrew and me. His birthday celebrations were elaborate affairs with friends from school, custom cakes from the expensive bakery across town, and piles of carefully wrapped presents. Mine were afterthoughts, store-bought cake, a few hastily purchased gifts, and often scheduled around Andrew's baseball games or school events. Christmas mornings told the same story. Andrew's pile of gifts towered over mine, and the disparity only grew more obvious as we aged. When I was 16, I received a generic jewelry box while Andrew got the latest gaming system. "Your brother needs more encouragement," my mother would say when she caught me staring at the imbalance. "You've always been so independent, Heather." The pattern extended beyond material things. My parents attended every single one of Andrew's baseball games, cheering wildly from the bleachers and consoling him after losses. Meanwhile, they missed my debate team state finals due to Andrew's baseball practice. Practice, not even a game. When I won first place, I called home excited to share the news, only to be cut short. "That's nice, honey. Andrew's coach thinks he might make varsity next year." Academically, I excelled. Honor roll every semester, president of the science club, editor of the school newspaper. Andrew struggled to maintain AC average and seemed allergic to extracurricular activities unless they involved sports. Yet when report cards arrived, my achievements were expected while Andrew's passing grades were celebrated. "Not everyone is naturally smart like you, Heather," my father would say, ruffling Andrew's hair. "Your brother has to work twice as hard." The irony that Andrew rarely worked at all went unacknowledged. Despite the constant message that my accomplishments meant less, I channeled my hurt into determination. I studied relentlessly, secured a full academic scholarship to Boston University, and packed my bags for the East Coast, 3 states and 1,000 miles from the subtle pain of my childhood home. College brought freedom and a fresh perspective. Meeting families who celebrated their daughters' achievements showed me what I'd missed. Still, I called home weekly, sent thoughtful birthday gifts, and returned for major holidays. The distance helped me maintain the relationship while protecting my growing sense of self-worth. Meanwhile, Andrew's path took a different direction. He attended the local community college but dropped out after 3 semesters. He started a lawn care business that folded after one summer, then worked at my uncle's car dealership until he was fired for chronic lateness. Each failure was met with parental understanding. "He's finding his way," or "he's such a creative spirit." After graduating with honors, I landed a position at a prestigious financial firm in Boston. Each promotion brought congratulatory calls from my parents that inevitably turned to Andrew's latest struggles. "Your brother is thinking of starting a food truck. Do you think you could help him with a business plan?" Or, "Andrew needs to replace his car. Nothing fancy, but reliable. You're doing so well now." I fielded these requests with a combination of financial advice, never money, and gentle suggestions about job opportunities. The pattern became clear. They saw my success as a resource for Andrew's benefit. What I didn't realize was how deep this expectation ran, or how deliberately it had been cultivated. Despite my growing resentment, I couldn't extinguish the flicker of hope that someday they would see me, really see me, and offer the approval I still craved. This lingering desire for parental validation would keep me tethered to toxic dynamics far longer than I should have tolerated. After 2 years of limiting visits home to brief holiday appearances, I took a full week off for Thanksgiving when I was 26. Boston had become my sanctuary, my apartment overlooking the Charles River, my close-knit group of friends, my thriving career. Still, the magnetic pull of family and the hope that things might improve drew me back to Michigan. The moment I walked through the door, the familiar weight settled on my shoulders. The house looked exactly the same, family photos dominated by Andrew's baseball portraits, the living room furniture arranged around the TV where he played video games. My bedroom, converted to a home office within months of my departure for college, contained no trace of my existence. Thanksgiving dinner was an exercise in awkward conversation. My parents asked superficial questions about Boston without listening to the answers. Andrew, now 24 and living at home, temporarily, dominated the conversation with his latest business idea, a craft brewery. The market is exploding right now, he explained, gesturing with his fork. Everyone loves local beer. I've been experimenting with recipes in the garage. Andrew has quite a talent for it, my mother beamed. He made a pumpkin ale that the neighbors just raved about. I noticed the new brewing equipment in the corner of the dining room, at least several $1,000s worth. Meanwhile, they'd complained about the cost when I'd suggested flying them to Boston to see my new apartment. What's your business plan look like? I asked Andrew, genuinely curious. The craft beer market is competitive. Don't interrogate your brother, Heather, my father frowned. Not everything needs a spreadsheet and 5-year projections. I retreated into silence, focusing on my mother's dry turkey and wondering why I'd bothered to come. The next morning, my father asked me to join him for coffee at the local diner, a rare invitation that sparked a glimmer of hope. Maybe he wanted to reconnect, to have a real conversation about my life in Boston. The diner was nearly empty, the post-Thanksgiving lull keeping most people home with their leftovers. We settled into a booth by the window, and after ordering, my father cleared his throat. You know, Heather, I'm really proud of what you've accomplished, he began, stirring his coffee methodically. My heart lifted momentarily before he continued. Family is everything, don't you think? Supporting each other through thick and thin. I nodded cautiously, sensing where this was headed. Your brother has such passion for this brewery concept. Reminds me of your grandfather. He had an entrepreneurial spirit too. He took a sip of coffee, eyes fixed on the parking lot outside. Andrew needs investors to get started. Nothing major, just some seed money. Has he approached the bank? Or looked into small business loans? I asked. Banks don't understand vision, my father waved dismissively. They want guarantees. Family invests in potential. The request hung in the air until I finally asked, how much is seed money? 10,000 would get him started properly. Equipment, permits, initial ingredients. He finally met my eyes. You're doing so well now, Heather. It wouldn't even dent your savings. The presumption stung worse than the amount. They had no idea about my finances, my student loan payments, Boston's outrageous rent, the retirement account I was building. And more importantly, they had no right to make claims on my hard-earned money. I'd need to see a business plan, I said firmly. Projected costs, market analysis, revenue forecasts. My father's expression hardened. He's family, not a client. Don't you trust your own brother? The guilt trip was familiar territory, but I held my ground. I trust him as my brother. Business is different. After an uncomfortable back and forth, I compromised, $5,000 as a gift, not an investment. No repayment expected, but also no future contributions without a proper business plan. My father accepted with poor grace, making me feel simultaneously generous and stingy. 6 months later, I called home and casually asked about the brewery progress. My mother hesitated before answering. Well, plans change, you know. Andrew decided he needed reliable transportation first. Can't start a business without being mobile. A quick scroll through Andrew's social media confirmed my suspicion. My $5,000 brewery investment was parked in my parents' driveway, a shiny used truck with custom wheels. The brewery had never materialized beyond the equipment already purchased before my contribution. When I raised this with my father during our next call, his defense was immediate. The truck is a necessary first step. He's networking with local bars, building relationships. You can't do that without reliable transportation. That wasn't what the money was for, I insisted, trying to keep my voice level. Don't be so rigid, Heather. Business evolves. Besides, it was a gift, remember? You said so yourself. The conversation left me feeling hollow and used. I'd known, on some level, that the money might not go toward an actual brewery, but the blatant bait-and-switch and subsequent gaslighting cut deep. That night, I made myself a promise. No more financial gifts without clear boundaries and expectations. Little did I know this was only the beginning of their financial manipulations. 2 years after the brewery-turned-truck incident, my career had accelerated. I'd been promoted to senior financial analyst with a corner office overlooking the Boston skyline and a team of 3 junior analysts reporting to me. My social circle had expanded, and I'd even started dating someone, Mark, a software engineer I'd met through friends. My phone rang at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in July. Seeing my mother's name on the screen sent an immediate spike of anxiety through me. "Hello," I answered, already calculating the earliest flights to Michigan. "Heather, there's a family emergency." My mother's voice trembled. "You need to come home right away." My heart raced. "What happened? Is it Dad?" "Andrew, I can't talk about it over the phone. Just please come home as soon as possible." Despite my pressing questions, she refused to elaborate, only repeating that I needed to come immediately. I spent the night booking a last-minute flight for the following morning, $876 that decimated the vacation fund I'd been building for a trip to Portugal, and arranging emergency time off work. When my flight landed in Michigan, I rushed from the airport to my parents' house, scenarios of hospital rooms and accidents playing through my mind. I pulled into the driveway, noticing several unfamiliar cars parked along the street. Strange for a family emergency, I thought. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open to find a birthday party. Streamers hung from the ceiling, a happy 60th birthday banner stretched across the living room wall, and about 20 people turned to stare at me. "Surprise!" my mother called out, rushing over to hug me. "You made it just in time. Your father will be so thrilled you're here." The relief that no one was hurt quickly gave way to confusion, then anger as I realized what had happened. This was the emergency. "Well, we knew you were busy with work, but this is an important milestone for your father. We couldn't celebrate properly without you here." I stood frozen in the entryway, my overnight bag still clutched in my hand. My mother misinterpreted my silence as travel fatigue and led me into the kitchen, chattering about the cake and dinner plans. Andrew emerged from the basement, beer in hand. "Hey, sis. Didn't think you'd actually come. Dad's going to flip when he gets back from golfing with Uncle Steve." "Golfing?" I echoed. "During a family emergency?" Andrew laughed. "Is that what Mom told you?" Classic. I cornered my mother by the refrigerator. "You said it was an emergency. I thought someone was hurt or dying." "Don't be so dramatic, Heather. Family celebrations are emergencies of the heart." She patted my cheek. "Your brother planned everything. Isn't he thoughtful? He even picked the menu, all Dad's favorites." Before I could respond, she hurried off to arrange the appetizer table. I retreated to the bathroom, locking the door behind me to collect myself. The emergency had cost me nearly $900, 2 vacation days, and a night of sleep, all for a party I could have easily attended with proper notice. During the party, I overheard Andrew talking to one of our cousins about his upcoming trip to Europe. 3 weeks backpacking, Amsterdam, Berlin, Prague, Vienna. Going to be epic. Leaving next month. My blood ran cold as I did the mental math. The cost of my last-minute flight was roughly equivalent to what Andrew would need for spending money in Europe. Had they deliberately manipulated me into subsidizing his trip? When I confronted my mother later that evening, she seemed genuinely confused by my anger. "We wanted to surprise your father, and we wanted you here. I don't understand why you're making such a fuss. You could have told me weeks ago about the party. You didn't need to create a false emergency. Would you have come otherwise?" she asked pointedly. The question hung between us, uncomfortable in its accuracy. With proper notice, I probably would have sent a thoughtful gift and a video message rather than disrupt my work week. The remainder of the weekend dragged painfully. I maintained a polite facade for my father's sake, but inside I seethed at the manipulation. My parents had exploited my sense of family duty, knowing I would drop everything for a crisis. Meanwhile, Andrews still lived at home rent-free, working part-time at a local bar and planning European adventures. On the flight back to Boston, I made two decisions. First, I would establish clearer boundaries around visits and communication. Second, I would no longer respond to vague emergencies without specific information. Over the following months, I implemented these changes methodically. I scheduled regular video calls instead of answering every impromptu phone call. I made it clear I would visit for Christmas, but not for Thanksgiving. I started responding to guilt trips with calm but firm pushback. My parents reacted with a mix of passive-aggressive comments and emotional appeals. "We barely hear from you anymore," and "we're not getting any younger, you know," became regular refrains in our conversations. Andrew occasionally texted to ask why I was being so cold to Mom and Dad, only to disappear when I explained my perspective. The distance I created protected me, but it also intensified the guilt I felt for abandoning my family. Were my boundaries reasonable, or was I overreacting to a harmless birthday surprise? The question plagued me, even as I maintained the guardrails I'd established. What I didn't realize then was that these incidents, the brewery money and the emergency party, were merely symptoms of a much deeper pattern of financial exploitation that had been planned long before I'd achieved any success. A year after the emergency birthday party, I had saved enough for a down payment on a condo in Boston's South End. The real estate market was competitive, but my financial discipline had positioned me to take advantage of a slight market dip. Excited about this milestone, I called my parents to share the news. "That's nice, honey," my mother said after my announcement. "Although I don't understand why you'd want to tie yourself down with property in Boston when you could move back to Michigan. Housing is so much more affordable here." I ignored the familiar suggestion and continued explaining the features of the condo I was considering. "Well, if you're serious about this," my father interjected, "you might want to consider the family investment account. Your timing could be better than we thought." "Family investment account?" I asked, confused. "What are you talking about?" My mother jumped in. "The college funds your grandparents set up. Remember? We've been letting them grow since you both finished school." This was the first I'd heard of any such accounts. "Grandma and Grandpa set up college funds for Andrew and me." "Of course," my father said. "Equal amounts for both of you when you were born. Your grandmother insisted on it, said education was the greatest gift they could give their grandchildren." A creeping sense of unease settled over me. "I don't understand. I paid for college with scholarships and loans. I'm still paying off those loans." The silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably before my mother spoke. "Well, yes, because you got all those scholarships. You were always the smart one. It seemed wasteful to use the fund when you had other resources." "So, what happened to my college fund?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. "It's still there," my father said cautiously. "Growing nicely, in fact." "And Andrew's fund?" Another pause. "Also still there. He didn't finish his degree, as you know." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "So I worked multiple jobs and took out loans to pay for my education while my college fund just sat there? And Andrew dropped out but gets to keep his fund intact." "It's not that simple, Heather." My father's tone turned defensive. "We were being practical. You're doing fine without the money. Did you ever plan to tell me about this fund?" I asked. "Of course," my mother jumped in. "When the time was right." "And when would that be?" My voice had taken on an edge I rarely used with my parents. "When you needed it for something important," she replied. "Like your brother will when he finally decides what he wants to do with his life." The implications stunned me into momentary silence. My education, the foundation of my current success, hadn't qualified as something important, but whatever Andrew eventually decided to do would be. "I want to access my fund," I said finally. "It was intended for my education, and I have education debt to pay off." "Now you're just being materialistic," my mother sighed. We raised you to be more generous than this, Heather. Generous. I couldn't contain my incredulity. How is it generous to deny me access to money that was specifically designated for my education while preserving Andrew's fund despite him not completing his degree? Your brother might go back to school someday, my father said. We need to keep his options open. The conversation deteriorated from there, with my parents characterizing my request as selfish and short-sighted. When I pointed out the fundamental unfairness of the situation, they retreated into a familiar refrain: family takes care of family. You don't need the money like Andrew might. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment staring at the wall, replaying not just this conversation, but countless moments from my childhood through this new lens. The pattern was unmistakable. My achievements were expected and unremarkable, while Andrew's potential always took precedence over my actual accomplishments. The revelation about the college funds cast my entire relationship with my parents into doubt. Had they ever seen me as anything more than a safety net for my brother? Had my academic success been valued only because it saved them money they could redirect to Andrew? Over the next few months, my communication with my family dwindled to brief, infrequent exchanges. I sought therapy to process the profound sense of betrayal I felt. My therapist helped me recognize the pattern of financial exploitation and the emotional manipulation that enabled it. You've been cast in the role of the capable one who doesn't need support, she explained. It's a common dynamic in families with unbalanced parental investment. Your success became a justification for withholding resources and redirecting them to your brother. I focused on building connections with friends who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. I mentored junior analysts at work, finding fulfillment in supporting others' growth without being depleted myself. I continued dating Mark, whose family dynamics offered a healthy contrast to my own. His parents celebrated his accomplishments while also supporting his sister's different path. Still, the knowledge that my parents had deliberately concealed financial resources meant for my education, resources that could have spared me years of loan payments, left a wound that refused to heal completely. I wondered what other secrets they might be keeping and how far they would go to maintain the imbalance between their children. I would soon have my answer, and it would be far worse than I could have imagined. 6 months after discovering the truth about the college funds, I received a call from Andrew on a Wednesday afternoon. "Dad's in the hospital," he said without preamble. Heart attack. The world tilted momentarily. Despite everything, these were still my parents. "Is he okay? How serious is it?" "They're saying it was minor, but he's staying overnight for observation." Mom's pretty shaken up. This time, there was no question about whether I would go home. I booked the next available flight, notified my team at work, and was on my way to Michigan within hours. The hospital was quiet when I arrived, visiting hours nearly over. My father looked smaller somehow in the hospital bed, monitors beeping softly beside him. My mother sat in a chair by the window, Andrew slouched against the wall scrolling through his phone. "Heather," my father's face brightened when he saw me. "You didn't have to come all this way." "Of course I did," I said, taking his hand. "How are you feeling?" The doctors had confirmed it was a mild heart attack. With medication and lifestyle changes, he was expected to make a full recovery. The immediate danger had passed, but the experience had clearly rattled everyone. We left the hospital together, my mother insisting we all stay at the house rather than my booking a hotel room. "Family should be together at times like this," she said, and I didn't have the energy to argue. Andrew arrived late to dinner the next evening, after my father had been discharged. There was a strange tension in his greeting, a reluctance to meet my eyes that I attributed to the stress of our father's health scare. Over a casserole brought by a neighbor, my parents began discussing retirement. "This was a wake-up call," my father said. "I can't keep pushing off retirement planning. We're not getting any younger." "I've been saying that for years," my mother added. "But you always think there's more time." The conversation turned to their financial situation, the mortgage they'd refinanced 5 years ago, their modest 401k balances, the unpredictability of healthcare costs. "I can help you look at your options," I offered. "It's literally what I do for a living. We could set up a call next week with my financial planning colleague who specializes in retirement strategies." My mother seemed about to respond when her phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up to pass it to her, and that's when I saw it. A text message from my father displayed on the lock screen. Don't worry about retirement. We told Andrew we'll make his sister pay for everything. The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the table. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. What is this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I pointed to the phone, the message still visible on the screen. My mother snatched the phone up, her face draining of color as she read the text. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. It's not what it sounds like, he began. Really? Because it sounds exactly like you've been planning to use me as your retirement fund. My voice trembled with rage and hurt. And apparently you've already promised Andrew I'll foot the bill for him too. You're taking it out of context, my mother insisted. Your father doesn't always express himself clearly in texts. Then explain the context to me. I looked from one parent to the other, then to Andrew, who suddenly seemed fascinated by his plate. How exactly should I interpret, make his sister pay for everything? When no one answered, I pressed harder. How long have you been planning this? Was this always the endgame? Raise one child to succeed, so she can support the rest of you. You owe us, my father finally said, his voice hardening. We raised you, put a roof over your head, food on the table. Now you've got this fancy career and big city lifestyle, while we struggled to make ends meet. I owe you. I echoed incredulously. I worked for every single thing I have. I earned scholarships you didn't even use for my education. I took out loans. I worked through college. Nothing was handed to me, quite the opposite. Andrew finally spoke up, his voice quiet. They've been talking about it for years, if you want the truth. Since you got your first big promotion. Dad said it was only fair that you help out since you're doing so well. Help out with what, exactly? I demanded. He wouldn't meet my eyes. My student loans. The money I borrowed from them to start those businesses. Their retirement. The house repairs. And they promised you I'd pay for all this. I asked him directly. He nodded, shame evident in his posture. They said you had plenty of money and that's what family is for. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. This wasn't a momentary lapse or an impulsive request. This was a calculated, long-term strategy to exploit my success, one they'd been discussing and planning for years, without my knowledge or consent. How dare you, I said, standing up so abruptly my chair toppled backward. How dare you plot to use me like an ATM? How dare you promise my money to Andrew without even asking me? Don't be so dramatic, Heather, my mother started, but I cut her off. No. This ends now. I am not your retirement plan. I am not Andrew's safety net. I am your daughter, and I deserved better than to be valued only for what I could provide financially. Years of suppressed hurt and anger poured out as I recounted every instance of favoritism, every dismissal of my achievements, every financial manipulation they'd attempted. My voice rose and cracked, tears streaming down my face as I finally named the dynamic that had shaped our family for decades. I always thought if I achieved enough, you'd finally see me, I said, my voice dropping to nearly a whisper. But you never saw me at all. You only saw what I could do for you. I grabbed my purse and coat, heading for the door. My mother called after me, but I couldn't bear to hear another justification or guilt trip. I drove through blurry tears to the nearest hotel, checked in, and collapsed on the bed, completely shattered. For hours, I lay there, cycling through rage, grief, and a strange sense of clarity. The text message had confirmed what part of me had always suspected, but had been afraid to acknowledge. My parents saw me primarily as a resource to be tapped, not as a person to be loved for myself. As devastating as this realization was, it also offered a kind of freedom. I no longer needed to chase their approval or acceptance. I could stop hoping for a relationship that had never truly existed. The illusion had been stripped away, leaving painful truth in its place. That night in the sterile hotel room, I reached my emotional rock bottom. But somewhere in the darkness, I also found the beginning of a path forward, one that would require difficult boundaries and painful separations, but might eventually lead to healing. The next morning, a text from my mother arrived. Family meeting at the house. 2 p.m., we need to clear the air. I considered ignoring it, booking a flight back to Boston and cutting ties completely. But some combination of morbid curiosity and lingering hope for resolution persuaded me to agree. I spent the morning walking around a nearby park, rehearsing what I would say and steeling myself against the emotional manipulation I knew would come. At exactly 2 p.m., I pulled into my parents' driveway, determined to maintain my composure regardless of what transpired. The house felt tense as I walked in, my father and mother sitting stiffly on the living room couch, Andrew perched uncomfortably on the edge of an armchair. "Thank you for coming," my mother began, her voice carrying the forced pleasantness she typically used when trying to smooth over conflicts. "We feel terrible about how things ended yesterday. We never meant to hurt you," my father added. The text was poorly worded. I remained silent, waiting for the actual apology that never came. "The thing is," my mother continued after an awkward pause, "families help each other. That's what we've always taught you both. And I have helped," I pointed out. "The brewery money. Flying home whenever you call. Offering financial advice. But there's a difference between helping and being used." My father cleared his throat. "The situation is more complicated than you realize, Heather." What followed was a series of revelations that left me stunned. They had remortgaged the house twice to bail out Andrew's failed business ventures. They had minimal retirement savings because they'd repeatedly tapped their 401(k)s to cover his debts. There were credit card balances, personal loans, even a line of credit against my father's life insurance policy, all used to support Andrew's lifestyle and failures. "We're not in a good position," my father concluded, his voice heavy with what seemed like genuine worry. "The heart attack made us realize we need to address this before it's too late." I felt a momentary pang of sympathy, quickly replaced by suspicion as I sensed the conversation steering toward their solution. "We've been thinking," my mother said, exchanging a look with my father. "You mentioned buying property. What if instead you bought this house from us?" The proposal unfolded with horrifying clarity. I would purchase their house at fair market value, despite knowing they'd stripped most of its equity, allow them to continue living there rent-free, provide them a monthly stipend for living expenses, and help Andrew clear his debts to give him a fresh start. "This way, everyone wins," my father explained, as if proposing a brilliant business deal rather than a complete financial exploitation. "You get an investment property, we get security in our golden years, and Andrew gets the clean slate he needs." "That's what family does," my mother added. "We take care of each other." I looked from one parent to the other, then to Andrew, who had remained conspicuously silent throughout the presentation. "Is there anything you want to add?" I asked him directly. He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "It makes sense to me. You're the one with the money." In that moment, with perfect clarity, I understood that nothing would ever change. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a temporary lapse in judgment. This was who they were, people who saw my success as a resource to exploit rather than an achievement to celebrate. "No," I said simply. "No what?" My father frowned. "No to all of it. I will not buy this house. I will not provide you with a stipend. I will not pay off Andrew's debts." My voice was calm, detached almost. "You are my parents, and I love you, but I will not be your ATM." My father's face flushed with anger. "After everything we've done for you? The sacrifices we made? The opportunities we gave you?" "What opportunities exactly?" I asked. "The ones I created for myself through hard work while you diverted resources to Andrew? The education I funded through scholarships and loans while my college fund sat untouched?" "Don't talk to your father that way," my mother interjected. "We gave you a stable home, a good upbringing. We drove you to those debate tournaments and science competitions." "Sometimes," I corrected, "when it didn't conflict with Andrew's baseball schedule." Andrew finally spoke up. "Can't you just help a little? You've got plenty of money." I turned to him, seeing for the first time how our parents' favoritism had damaged him too, creating an entitled adult who expected bailouts rather than building resilience. I acknowledged. "But it wouldn't actually help any of you. It would just enable the same patterns to continue." The meeting devolved from there. My father brought up childhood sacrifices, my mother cried, Andrew sulked. I remained firm in my refusal, eventually standing to leave when it became clear we were talking in circles. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back," my father called after me, the classic ultimatum I should have expected. I paused in the doorway. "I hope you don't mean that. I would like to have a relationship with you, a healthy one based on mutual respect, not financial exploitation. When you're ready for that, I'll be here." I drove back to the hotel in a strange state of grief mingled with relief. The family I'd known, or thought I'd known, was effectively gone. But the weight of obligation and manipulation that had burdened me for years had lifted as well. In my hotel room, I allowed myself to fully feel the loss. I cried for the parents I'd wished I had, for the brother who might have been my friend under different circumstances, for the years spent seeking approval that was never going to come. But beneath the grief lay something unexpected, a sense of freedom and possibility. My flight back to Boston the next day felt like crossing a boundary between my old life and something new. Whatever came next, I knew it would be on my terms, not dictated by toxic family dynamics or financial exploitation. The price of this freedom was high, potentially losing my family entirely, but for the first time, I understood that my well-being was worth that cost. The 2 weeks after returning to Boston passed in a blur of emotional processing. I threw myself into work during the day, finding comfort in the logical precision of financial analysis, then spent evenings alternating between numbness and waves of grief. My therapist created space for me to navigate the complex emotions of family estrangement. "What you're experiencing is ambiguous loss," she explained. "Your family is physically alive, but psychologically absent in the way you needed them to be. That's particularly difficult to grieve." Meanwhile, messages from my family arrived in predictable patterns. My mother sent tearful voicemails about how I'd broken her heart. My father's texts oscillated between angry demands and clumsy attempts at reconciliation that never included actual apologies. Andrew messaged occasionally with superficially friendly check-ins that inevitably included mentions of financial struggles. I responded minimally, maintaining what my therapist called compassionate distance, acknowledging their messages without engaging in their manipulation tactics. "I need time to process everything," became my standard response. "I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk." My friends in Boston proved invaluable during this period. Emma, my closest friend since college, invited me for dinner weekly, providing normalcy when everything felt unstable. My team at work stepped up when I needed to take mental health days. Mark offered quiet support, never pushing me to talk, but always available when I needed to vent or cry. The financial aftermath required attention too. I met with my own financial advisor to ensure my accounts were secure and inaccessible to family members. I drafted a new will specifying that any inheritance should go to educational charities rather than my family. Small steps that helped me reclaim control. Rather than sending money to my parents or brother, I established automatic monthly donations to scholarship funds for first-generation college students. Redirecting the resources they had tried to extract from me toward helping others brought a sense of purpose and healing. The first holiday season after the rupture loomed with particular dread. Thanksgiving came and went with a friend giving at Emma's apartment, chaotic and warm in a way family holidays had never been. As Christmas approached, the pressure intensified with daily messages from my mother about family traditions and forgiveness being the greatest gift. On Christmas Eve, my phone lit up with an unexpected call from Andrew. After hesitating, I answered. "Merry Christmas, I guess," he said awkwardly. "Same to you," I replied, waiting for the real reason behind his call. "Mom and Dad are going crazy with you not coming home," he continued. "They've been on my case to call you. Like I can magically fix everything." A year ago, this would have triggered my caretaking instinct. Now I recognized it as part of the pattern, Andrew positioned as the messenger, softening me up for whatever request would follow. "I'm sorry they're putting that on you," I said sincerely. "But their relationship with me isn't your responsibility to fix." "Yeah, well." He paused. "They thought maybe if I talked to you about what's going on with me, you might reconsider. I'm trying to get a loan for a food truck concept, but with my credit history." The familiarity of the request almost made me laugh. Nothing had changed. "I can't help financially, Andrew. but I'd be happy to look at your business plan or connect you with small business resources in Michigan." His tone shifted immediately from friendly to cold. "Forget it. I don't need your charity." "It's not charity to offer knowledge instead of money," I pointed out. "That's actually respect." "Whatever. Mom and Dad were right. You've turned your back on this family." Before hanging up, he added, "By the way, they're telling everyone you abandoned us after Dad's heart attack." Thought you should know. The revelation stung but didn't surprise me. Character assassination was a predictable response to losing control over me. Instead of calling my parents to defend myself, I turned off my phone and joined friends for a Christmas Eve concert in Boston Common, the city lights and holiday music creating a bubble of joy amid the family turmoil. Later that night, Andrew texted again. "They want me to tell you they're considering selling the house and moving in with Uncle Steve if you don't help. Just thought you should know what your selfishness is causing." The transparent manipulation attempt clarified everything. This wasn't about love or family or even my father's health. It was about money and control, pure and simple. I extended my communication break indefinitely, focusing instead on building new traditions and connections. I volunteered at a local financial literacy program for teens aging out of foster care, finding purpose in helping young people navigate independence. I deepened friendships that were based on mutual support rather than obligation. I continued therapy, gradually unwrapping the complex layers of family dynamics that had shaped me. The pain didn't disappear, but it changed form, from an acute, stabbing wound to a dull ache that occasionally flared but no longer defined my daily existence. I was grieving the family I wished I had while learning to accept the reality of the family I actually had. Most importantly, I was discovering who I was outside the role I'd been assigned, not the family ATM or the successful one with obligations to fulfill, but simply Heather, with my own needs, boundaries, and right to determine how my resources would be used. 1 year after discovering the text message that changed everything, my life had transformed in ways both visible and invisible. My corner office now housed personal touches I'd previously avoided, photos of friends, art I loved, plants that required commitment to nurture. My promotion to investment team director had come with challenges I embraced rather than doubted my worthiness to face. The most significant change wasn't professional, though. It was in the quiet moments alone, when the voice in my head no longer echoed my parents' judgments, but spoke with my own authority and compassion. Professional success had continued, but now it felt like mine alone, not a resource to be tapped by family, not a performance to earn approval, just the fruit of my talents and efforts to be used according to my values. My contact with my parents remained minimal and carefully boundaried. Occasional text exchanges, brief calls on major holidays, nothing more. Andrew had stopped communicating entirely after I declined to co-sign a loan for his latest venture. Then, 6 months into this new normal, a letter arrived, handwritten on cream stationery, postmarked from Traverse City, Michigan. My grandmother's distinctive script covered 3 pages with warmth and unexpected understanding. "Your cousin Michelle told me what happened with your parents and brother," she wrote. "I want you to know I've seen this pattern in our family before. Your grandfather's brother was treated the same way your parents treated Andrew, excused, bailed out, enabled until he never learned to stand on his own. Meanwhile, your grandfather was expected to support everyone while receiving little appreciation." She continued, "I tried to prevent this by setting up equal college funds for you and Andrew. I'm heartbroken to learn how that intention was subverted. Please know that I see you, Heather. I value your strength and integrity. And I support your decision to protect yourself, whatever that looks like." The letter brought fresh tears, but healing ones. Here, finally, was a family member who understood, who saw the dynamic clearly and validated my experience. We began corresponding regularly, building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Around the same time, I received an unexpected email from Andrew. "Can we talk?" was all it said. Cautiously, I agreed to a phone call, half expecting another financial request. Instead, Andrew spoke hesitantly about changes in his own perspective. "I moved out of their house," he began. "Got an apartment with a roommate and found a job at a marketing firm. Entry-level stuff, but it's a start. That's great, I said, genuinely pleased, but still wary. Look, I know I've been. He paused, searching for words. I've been part of the problem. They convinced me I was entitled to your help, and I believed them because it was easier than standing on my own. Over the course of an hour, Andrew described his growing recognition of how our parents' favoritism had damaged both of us, me through exploitation, him through enabling. He'd begun therapy after a relationship ended because his girlfriend cited his entitlement and dependency as deal breakers. I'm not asking for money, he clarified. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to figure my own shit out. And I'm sorry for my part in everything that happened. I accepted his apology with cautious optimism. Over the following months, our relationship slowly rebuilt on more equal footing. We weren't close, but we were cordial, checking in occasionally without the undercurrent of financial expectation that had previously defined our interactions. My parents proved less capable of change. When they realized Andrew would no longer function as their go-between to access my resources, they alternated between love bombing, "We miss our wonderful daughter," and thinly veiled guilt trips, "Your father's health is deteriorating from the stress of your absence." Each attempt at manipulation became easier to recognize and deflect. I hope Dad feels better soon. Has he tried the meditation app one suggested? I would respond, acknowledging their message without engaging with its manipulative subtext. Meanwhile, I focused on building what my therapist called my chosen family, connections based on genuine care rather than obligation or utility. Emma and her husband included me in their family celebrations. Mark and I deepened our relationship, his steady presence a reminder that love could exist without exploitation. My colleague Jasmine became a close friend and confidant after we collaborated on a major project. I found particular fulfillment in volunteer work with a nonprofit that provided financial literacy education to young women from disadvantaged backgrounds. Teaching these girls to recognize their worth beyond their economic utility helped heal my own wounds around money and family. When Thanksgiving arrived again, I hosted dinner in my newly purchased condo, not the one in South End I'd originally considered, but a more spacious unit in Jamaica Plain with room for a proper dining table and guest bedroom. Emma and her husband, Mark, Jasmine and her partner, 2 colleagues from work, and a neighbor who couldn't travel home gathered around my table. As we shared what we were grateful for, I realized how far I'd come from the previous Thanksgiving, when I'd still been reeling from the text message discovery. I'm grateful for boundaries, I said when my turn came. And for all of you who respect them. Later that evening, after everyone had left except Mark, who was helping with dishes, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "We missed you at the table today. It's not too late to make things right with your family." I showed it to Mark, who knew my whole story. "What will you say?" he asked. I considered the message, recognizing the implied guilt trip, but no longer feeling its sting. I'll tell her I had a wonderful Thanksgiving with people who love me for who I am, not what I can provide. And that I hope someday they can be among those people. "Are you okay?" Mark asked, studying my expression. I was surprised to realize that, genuinely, I was. "Yes," I said. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm just clear. They can only hurt me if I give them the power to define my worth. And I don't do that anymore. That clarity has guided me forward. I maintain minimal contact with my parents while investing deeply in relationships that nurture rather than deplete me. I've established firm financial boundaries while remaining generous on my terms, funding scholarships, supporting causes I believe in, helping friends when they face genuine emergencies. The journey from financial victim to empowered individual wasn't linear or easy. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, days when the grief of family estrangement felt overwhelming. But with each step, I reclaimed a little more of myself from the role I'd been assigned. I am nobody's ATM. I am worthy of love that doesn't come with invoices attached. My success belongs to me, to share or withhold according to my own values rather than others' expectations. And in recognizing these truths, I found a peace I never thought possible. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with your own experience, know that you're not alone. Family financial exploitation happens more often than we discuss, and recognizing it is the first step toward freedom. Have you experienced similar dynamics in your own family? Drop a comment below sharing your story or how you established healthy boundaries. Don't forget to like this video if it helped you feel less alone, and subscribe for more content about navigating complex family relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your value isn't determined by what you can give others, but by who you are.